As we approach mid-June of 2021, we're expecting the 5th anniversary of Idle Heroes, and that will bring with it some heroes that will, hopefully, dramatically change the game of Idle Heroes. What we normally expect with the release of heroes at anniversary, Christmas or Chinese New Year is a large meta shift, whether it's in PvP or PvE. Normally these meta shifts bring with them transformations in how people play the game, and a drastic change in the way that a lot of people choose to spend their money and what heroes they think are good. But over the course of the 5 years of Idle Heroes, this ebb and flow of what is good and what is not has changed dramatically over the years. So today we're going to be talking about the top 5 heroes that when they were released radically changed the PvP scene. Nowadays, it's not unusual to see drastic changes to PvP. We have the Transcendence heroes, which when they came out were fantastic, and the release of Sherlock and Rogan, even Russell, was no exception. But we're going to be looking at heroes that came out before the last anniversary, so heroes that are over a year old, that have dramatically changed the PvP scene. So let's go check out today's video. In number 5, we have a hero which will probably surprise many of you non-veteran players. Faithblade was released to the game in early 2018, and this was a time where 10 stars were the only heroes you could have. There was no such thing as enabling. The highest you could get a hero to was 10 star. In this meta, such things as Unbending Will didn't exist, and many of the heroes that you know and love today were not in the game. When Faithblade was released, he brought with him one of the most oppressive active skills the game had seen. He hits 2 heroes and has an exceptionally high chance to stun them. What was more important with Faithblade was the fact that he was incredibly fast, and also when a hero died, he'd refill his energy, gaining 100 energy when a hero dies. Now that's important for 2 reasons. When a hero has more energy than 100, they gain skill damage, so it meant his active skill was able to do even more if more opponents died. In addition, if they survived, he was able to stun them. This resulted in Faithblade loops where he would go first with an energy artifact very quickly, hit the opponents and either stun the 2 targets or kill them. If they died, he would regain his energy, ready to do the same thing next turn. And this resulted in a very disgusting chain where you'd either be killed or stunned, and both of those things were pretty bad. Purified didn't exist, there was no way to remove CC, and that resulted in Faithblade being one of the most oppressive heroes in the game. And it increased the playability of heroes such as Kameth and Demon Hunter, because with speed artifacts and speed stones, they were able to be quicker than a speed energy Faithblade, which meant they were able to CC lock him. This resulted in people putting their Faithblades on the front line to avoid Kameth, but it still didn't stop Demon Hunter from being able to silence Faithblade. So believe it or not, Demon Hunter saw a lot of play in the end of the 10-star meta when Faithblade was the strongest hero in the game. In slot 4, we have Mim, a hero that is nowadays not very good. One thing you need to know about Mim is his release was truly terrific. It was the 2nd anniversary of the game, so 3 years ago now, and Mim gave the game something which we hadn't seen before. Mim literally punished your opponent for playing the game. Whenever a hero on the field would die, Mim would inflict damage to the entire opposing team, and this damage would stack if more enemies died, and this as well was a damage over time. For those of you that don't know how damage over time works in Idle Heroes, it is triggered immediately, where you take the damage when the effect activates, and it also activates at the end of each round. So heroes would drop mid-round because the damage over time would trigger when they die, causing a domino effect where more heroes would fall, and this was just blowing out teams. Now this was in the E3 meta, and in the E3 meta again, E5 wasn't in the game, so Unbending Will didn't exist. Now when Unbending Will was finally added to the game, giving heroes some much needed protection from taking damage, we found that Mim began to drop off because Unbending Will was a hard counter for him. That said, Unbending Will still did not stop Mim in its entirety, and cheese teams survived for a very, very, very long time. Now more so you don't see Mim in active play, but back in the day when he was released, it meant teams that had much lower combat power than other teams were able to do well. Because if you combined Mim with heroes such as Michelle or Destroyer, Emily's, you would be able to buff that Mim whilst also running low-level heroes which would die and then trigger Mim's passive. As well, Mim in multiples was absolutely oppressive. So Mim, upon his release, was absolutely terrifying, although he only makes slot 4 in this list, mainly because a few months later one of the most powerful heroes in the game came out, which changed things a little bit for Mim's future. In slot 3, we have probably the hero you're most familiar with on this list, Carrie. When Carrie came out, Carrie brought energy steal into the forefront of the meta and completely changed what was considered fast in the game. Before Carrie's release, any hero that was around 1188 speed was considered quick. However, Carrie setting the bar now at 1218, and anyone slower than Carrie would risk getting their energy stolen by carries, would basically be considered slow. So Carrie, first of all, transformed the way people approach the speed meta in PvP, considering anything slower than Carrie is bad, and as well stealing enemies' active skills was absolutely crucial, because by stealing their energy, Carrie was able to stop opponents from using their skills. Not only that, she was able to deal damage to them for having their energy. Now, before Carrie came out, we had heroes such as Garuda, and Garuda was devastating the meta at this time, and Carrie was a much needed counter for Garuda. However, it's far more than just Garuda that was stopped by Carrie. Carrie stopped literally everybody. Now, if Carrie was just energy stealing and very quick, that would be good enough on its own, but Carrie added dodge back to the game. For those of you that didn't know, dodge was removed from the game and replaced with block because it was considered too powerful. Heroes such as Mickey and Rosa were very good dodge heroes that a lot of people used to run in slot 1 back in the 10-star meta. However, when this was changed to block, block wasn't seen in the meta at all for a long time until we saw heroes like Shia and Horus who used block well in their strategies. However, Carrie added dodge back. For the first time, DH Games thought, you know what, we'll put dodge back in the game. And this only got worse when they released Drake and gave him dodge again. So there we go, we have 2 heroes now in the meta that can dodge. But to make matters even worse, Carrie is able to resurrect herself with full energy. So she's able to use her active skill and steal energy from opponents. So not only do you have a hero that can dodge and steal all your energy, you have a hero that can return to the battlefield, and also, did you not know, deal damage when she's down. That makes Carrie absolutely devastating, and for a very long time in the meta, multiple carries on a team was very common use, because actually carries would anchor each other, resulting in the other carries coming back before you could kill the carry that was still alive, and the carry that was still alive would probably dodge you, and it was just absolutely horrible. It was not unusual to see 3 or even 4 carries on high-level teams back in early 2020 when Carrie was released. So for that reason, Carrie makes it number 3 on this list, and she was definitely an oppressive powerhouse. In fact, in many of your opinions, I imagine you would want her higher up on this list. But the next hero also brings some fantastic changes. At the beginning of 2019, we saw the release of Ada. And Ada was another transformative hero that completely changed the meta. Just like how Mim punishes your opponent for playing the game and killing your heroes, Ada does the same, but instead Ada managed to dish out a mark that was able to punish heroes for using their active skills. That meant teams without Ada were doing far worse than teams with Ada, because basically if you didn't have an Ada, you were taking far more damage than your opponent, because when you used your active skills, you were taking damage, but your opponent wasn't. So pretty much in this meta, if you didn't have an Ada, you were going to take way more damage and your team was going to get blown out. As well, Ada punishes healers, reducing the amount of healing they can do, which is even worse for these kind of teams. So not only are you taking more damage, you're healing less. And it resulted in a meta that was very warped and polarized. Make matters worse, lots of people got really hype for the Christmas event that came before Ada's release, and lots of people picked up E5 Aspens. That meant when Chinese New Year rolled around in the beginning of 2019, not a lot of people had heroic summon scrolls, so unless you were willing to spend a ton of money or skipped Christmas entirely ready for the Chinese New Year hero, lots of people were unable to pick up Ada copies, and this resulted in massive changes in the arena leaderboards, where people who were once at the top were not even able to get into the top 25 because they just didn't have an Ada. Combine Ada's incredible incredible speed with an energy artifact, and opponents were getting punished and blown out really early on. And that's another important thing about Ada. She is incredibly fast, faster still than Carrie, who would come out a year later, and that meant that Ada was able to punish heroes for using their actives on round 1. So even using an energy artifact was considered dubious because you were running into the risk of taking damage from Adas. Now, the other thing you need to know about this early meta, which was early E3 in fact, E5 didn't exist when Ada came out. What you need to know is that Purify didn't exist. So enemies were going to be stuck with the marks that Ada gave them, and it meant they were going to take nasty, nasty amounts of damage. And now with the Purify changes, maybe Ada could see some rise again, with less heroes able to remove her marks and definitely get punished for using their active skills. That said though, Ada is quite slow in the current meta, and Transcendence heroes completely blow her out and change the way people approach the game. So for endgame whales, I would definitely not recommend you run Ada, but at the time, back in early 2019, she was definitely the best hero in the game. Now, one thing you'll have noticed from this list so far is all the heroes are light and dark heroes that either came out at Chinese New Year or Anniversary, and that's very important. That's a trend for lots of you new players you need to know about the game. Chinese New Year normally brings out a very powerful hero, except for most recently Chinese New Year gave Tussalago, which absolutely sucked. But also Anniversary, which is when Mim came out, is also when a fantastic hero enters the game. Heroes that are notable that should probably be on this list that came out at Anniversary but didn't quite make the cut would be heroes like Belrain, like Amun-Ra, and we always see something strong come out. Russell, another really good mention, as well as Drake, who transformed the PvE meta. With Anniversary fast approaching next week, that's something you need to consider, that these heroes that are coming out are very, 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 very likely to be exceptionally powerful. That said, that may not be the case because Transcendence heroes are the new chase heroes, and it's likely DH Games want to push their new love childs that have been out now for nearly a year. So basically, if we find the new heroes that come out in Anniversary to be lackluster, that's probably because DH Games are really pushing Transcendence heroes now. They are the new Light and Darks. But in this older meta, as you've seen, Light and Darks used to be the most powerful heroes in the game. Which is why I hope you're surprised by who is the #1 pick for this list. The best hero that has ever warped the meta, the #1 hero that has transformed the way people approach PvP, is Valkyrie. Now, many of you who are new to the game probably don't know about Valkyrie, but when Valkyrie came out, she was brutal. She was released to an E3 meta where HP was already the most powerful stat. When E3 came out, lots of heroes had way more HP than they were used to, and it actually stopped Faithblade from being good because it was no longer able to blow out opponents, and stun immunity and control immunity was far more common in the meta, especially with heroes like Mim, who is completely control immune, being added to the hero pool. So with Faithblade on the die down and Mim now being added, having more HP was very important because you wanted to be able to survive those Mim hits. Also, healing was exceptionally powerful because heroes were able, with the E3 update, to heal at the end of rounds, and that was very crucial. It made heroes a lot tankier than we've previously seen in earlier Idle Heroes metas before the E3 release. That's what made Valkyrie so powerful. Valkyrie was a hero whose damage over time scales with her HP. So you could make a Valkyrie with runes power and a HP stone, basically building her as tanky as possible. 2 and 2 split in your armor, and it meant that she would have an astronomically large HP pool, but was also able to deal a massive amount of damage in PvP. To make matters worse, whenever she was CC'd, she was able to do more of this burn damage to opponents, and Purify did not exist, so there was no way to remove burn damage. As well, Cthulhu did not exist in this game state, so there was no hero who was immune to burn. Also, Valkyrie's damage over time was not one round that you see now. In fact, in the earlier days, it used to deal not only more damage, but also last for 3 rounds. And what you'd find is that it completely reshaped the meta for Idle Heroes, mainly because Valkyrie was a forest hero. So originally the heroes that were really powerful were light and darks, and that meant only really heavy spenders or people that saved loads of scrolls were able to get them, which meant whales felt rewarded for their spending because they were able to build these really powerful 3 light, 3 dark teams. The release of Valkyrie changed everything. anyone could get Valkyrie. She's available in profit orbs. You can replace into Valkyrie. So there were lots of people who saved up their profit blessings and were able just to replace to get multiple copies of Valkyrie, combine that with getting copies of her from the summon event, and boom, you had an E5 Valkyrie the week she was released. And in following up more profit orb events, people would just orb straight into the Forest faction. If you go and watch loads of my older videos, we would get hype every time we pulled the Valkyrie, because Valkyrie was just so powerful. In fact, it resulted in many of the heavy spenders, especially from China, complaining to the developers saying, this is not fair. We have all these light and dark heroes and they're being completely blown out by a single Valkyrie. I kid you not, Valkyrie was basically unkillable, because not only does she heals when she's CC'd, she got the end of round heal from E3, and as well, she had a massive health pool. And this is what resulted in a further shift in the game, where you'll now see that more heroes have what's called damage based on HP. You'll see a lot of heroes say, deal damage equal to this hero's max HP, because that was the only way to break Valkyrie. In fact, Faithblade didn't even have that clause in his skill until he was buffed many months later. So heroes like Amavor became on the forefront of the meta because they were the only ones able to kill Valkyrie. And even then, that was a pipe dream, because the Valkyrie that originally came out was able to do loads of damage, and it was 3 rounds of damage over time. So this resulted in a quick nerf to Valkyrie, where her damage over time was reduced to 1 round, and the damage she did and the healing she did was reduced from what it used to be. But that didn't change Valkyrie's spot as the most powerful hero in the game. It just allowed other heroes to pull back into the meta. So it allowed Mim, Belrain, and Amavor to return, and it resulted in my opinion, with what was the greatest meta in Idle Heroes. Post-nerf Valkyrie meta was a beautiful tier list with 4 heroes making up the S tier, which was Valkyrie, Mim, Belrain, and Amavor. And there were loads of heroes in A tier, such as Demon Hunter and Valentino, and even Faithblade. There were loads of heroes that made it into this list because CC was still very strong, although you'll find this is when I started actually making YouTube videos and talking about strategies to play around CC, and there was a lot more clever team building strategies in this meta than we have today. Now, with the aura bonus being changed and heroes being basically splashable, you don't have to think about who you put in your team, and it's literally have all 4 Transcendence heroes and some support, and a lot of the skill comes from, well, I say skill, how heavily imprinted are your heroes and how many splendid artifacts do you have. None of this existed in the game. It was much more strategic, much more tactical. You had to know what your opponents were doing. In some metas, a speed energy Jara was really good because she was able to freeze and petrify, and most heroes were just stun immune because people were too afraid of Valentino and Faithblade. So it resulted in a really interesting meta, and as we saw releases of heroes like Cthulhu and Horus, and even Aspen, this only got more interesting. However, this all just fell apart with the release of Ada at the beginning of 2019, which resulted in a large shift in how the Idle Heroes metagame has progressed since. So pre-Ada, post-nerf Valkyrie meta, which was the end of 2018, was just really fun, a great time to play. But for many of you, you'll never get to experience this, so you have to live the dream vicariously through my stories. But there you go, Valkyrie was the #1 hero to transform the PvP meta. Let me know if there's any heroes you think I missed off. Many of you veteran players will have plenty of heroes you loved the release of, so let me know in the comments section down below. I know many of you will want to talk about Unimax or Rogan or Garuda, because there's been plenty of heroes that have been released that have transformed things. Even Sherlock, who was exceptionally powerful and still is very strong. So yeah, let me know in the comments section, and if you enjoyed this more discussion kind of video, let me know in the comments section as well. And if you want to catch more videos like this, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the future. Happy idling!